Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. And again, it's great to have you here. Interesting enough, as I reflect, all three of our comments focused a little bit on the whole issue of sequester, which is the elephant in every appropriator's room right now. But it is indeed the law, and passed by Congress, signed by the President. So hopefully, I agree with actually you and my distinguished ranking member. I hope we have a negotiation sometime to actually deal with it. I was actually part of the team that did that, working with Mr. Ryan on our side of the aisle. We had a very productive negotiation with Senator Murray. So, but that process came late. It came really after most of the Appropriations Subcommittees had been worked, but we were able to go back, as you rightly point out in your testimony, and undo some things that we all believe would have been damaging. I suspect the same thing will happen again. If it comes, it's likely to come late. I would encourage those above my pay grade and the administration above your pay grade to actually engage in that negotiation sooner rather than later. I think we get a much better work product out of our various appropriations subcommittee if that happens. On the sad likelihood that it probably won't happen to the last minute, most things around here seem to, for Congress, deadlines are alarm clocks. So we're probably going to be there again. If you had to look at your budget and we were in a flat funding situation, what are the things that, from your standpoint, you think really are the most critical? You lay out 5 priorities in your excellent statement, but pick some programs, pick some things in your view that are absolutely essential that this committee really ought to focus on no matter what.
Well, let me first back up again just to appreciate your willingness to look at a bigger deal and to work together. And the idea of Congress always using deadlines as alarm clocks, I'm always an optimist, and hopefully that could change and we could actually get ahead of the curve at some point.
200 years of history that would argue that you and I need to reconsider our optimism.
Next 200 years. I'm always looking forward. So, and let me just say that if things remain flat, the need doesn't remain flat. We have more children living below the poverty line than ever before. Our nation's school system for the first time ever this year is majority minority. That's not going to change. This isn't just doing the right thing for the black community, Latino community. This is the right thing for our nation. And as Congresswoman DeLauro pointed out, when you have not enough poor children being successful academically, we perpetuate cycles of poverty and social failure rather than sort of increasing upward mobility. But the points that, so there's increasing need. There's obviously a huge priority both for individual and families, but ultimately for our nation's economy. And as you guys know so well, we're competing for jobs in a globally competitive world now. And those jobs will either go to your communities and your states and our nation ultimately, or they'll go to Singapore and South Korea and China and India and places that are investing and innovating. And so the stakes here are really, really high, and I want folks to understand that. I think we have to educate our way to a better economy. In terms of priorities, I tried to lay out what was very important. I say everywhere that if I had one tax dollar, the best investment we can make is in high quality early learning, getting our babies off to a good start, stop playing catch up. We have to continue to raise the bar on the K-12 side, making sure that young people are truly graduating college and career ready. We love that high school graduation rates are at all-time highs. Dropout rates are all-time lows, but I'm nowhere near satisfied. Our dropout rate is still unacceptably high. And again, when you drop out today, there's no good opportunities out there. And then ultimately the goal today can't simply be to graduate from high school. There aren't good jobs with just a high school diploma. I think this idea of a minimum of community college being the expectation, the norm, is hugely important. The final thing I'd say, Mr. Chairman, is I think for the past 100 years, talk about sort of history, so the K-12 system has worked pretty well for the country and for most families. I think the world has changed, and our vision is a pre-K through 14 system of compulsory education, or not of compulsory, but of opportunity. And without that, our children start too far behind, and we don't catch up on the front end. In the back end, without those 2 years of community college, the job prospects are very low. So it's a fundamentally different vision of what the necessary education, the prerequisite for success is, and it has to go, I think, from pre-K through 14.
Let me ask you this, and I don't have a lot of time left because I'm going to try and force the clock, so we may come back to this issue. But on your community college issue, I share your concern about getting people beyond high school and getting them a higher education program. Community college is actually fairly reasonably priced in this country compared to four-year institutions. I think the average cost is a little bit over $3,000 a year. We have Pell Grants to cover that and can go beyond that. I'm a little mystified why that is the focus of so much resources, as opposed to either bringing down the longer-term cost of a more extensive education, because it seems to me we're more or less adequately funded. But if you disagree, please, please knock my theory down.
Well, no, these are really thoughtful questions. So I think there are two things. I think the reality is financially, while it does not seem that overwhelming, just a couple $100 here and there literally is the difference between staying in school or not, whether it's taking care of kids at home or whether it's a car breaking down. And so the margin for error is so small for so many of our families that are on the edge. Community colleges, some of my most inspiring visits. I travel the country, as you know, it's not just 18-year-olds, it's 38-year-olds, it's 58-year-olds retraining, retooling. Their jobs that they worked for 25 years at a plant or factory are gone. In green energy and IT and healthcare and advanced manufacturing, where I see great community colleges, they've become regional economic engines. They're literally driving economic activity and growth in their communities. This idea isn't our idea. It actually came from Governor Haslam in Tennessee, who I'm a huge fan of. And what he saw in their first year, I think my numbers won't be exact, you're probably better. They were thinking they might have like 25,000 applicants, and they had some like 75,000 or 90, it was wildly disproportionate. So both on the financial side, but also on the psychologically for young people to understand that this is a possibility, that despite my family's lack of money or despite my family's lack of education, this can be my dream. And so on both sides, making that again the norm rather than this is for wealthy folks.
Well, we may explore that a little bit more, but I appreciate very much that answer. And with that, I want to go to my ranking member, Ms. Laura. But I actually want to pick up on and maybe add a little bit on your theme. And this gets down to an area where I think there's always room for legitimate disagreement. But, Mr. Secretary, as in previous years, your budget request for fiscal year 2016 invests pretty heavily in competitive grant programs that allow the federal government to dictate how states and school districts operate. And actually, when I was a freshman on this committee back in 2009, there was considerable, I wouldn't say frustration, because again, this is an important tool. I'm not trying to suggest it's not, but particularly then when we had school budgets collapsing all over the country, there was a lot of concern. Why aren't we doing more of this stuff within the formula? Why aren't we allowing school districts to have more predictability? And again, you're using this approach to try and inspire some innovation in the field. We talked about that yesterday. I get that. However, states and school districts are constantly striving to provide quality education, and I think they're free to innovate on their own within formula grants. So given that, talk to me a little bit philosophically about the value of competition and grant system, which I think runs through your budget, because the counter argument is that leads to micromanagement up here, that frankly by using a grant system we're dictating a lot at the state and local level as to which directions they go. So I want to see how you find that balance and what you think is appropriate.
It's a great question. We have lots of both internal and discussions and debates and with other folks. Just for the record, to be clear, the overwhelming majority of our budget is formula based. It's actually 91.6%. So only about 8.4% of what we were proposing is competitive. So just to have the facts, I think most people think it's like 50-50 or something. It's not even close. So the overwhelming dollars are formula, and ask for more in Title I. Having said that, having a piece of our budget spur innovation and support innovation, we think makes tremendous sense. And Congressman, the thing for me that just sort of comes through here is that in every place where we're doing this, there's tremendous unmet demand. So if we were trying to sell something that nobody was buying, I would listen to that very, very closely. On the preschool development grants, we were able to fund 18 states. We had 36 states applying, again, across the political spectrum, so huge interest there. The Invest in Innovation Fund, we were able to fund 1 in 20 of the applications, so 5% basically of what we got in from communities around the country we were able to fund. Promise Neighborhoods, we funded 1 in 10. First in the World, 1 in 20. So quite to the contrary that we shouldn't be doing this. There's desperate need. There's huge creativity and innovation. There's a lack of resources. There's a lack of ability to scale. I think so many of these lessons, what we're learning through some fantastic work in rural Tennessee, has applications to rural Appalachian, maybe to native country as well. And I think is a very appropriate role for the federal government, whether it's us or whether it's the National Institute of Health or whether it's the military through DARPA, spurring innovation and scaling what works. So if I look at, not to go on too long, if I look at some investments we've made in Appalachia, in Ohio, huge increases in those students taking and passing AP classes. And my understanding is those districts, now their graduation rates are ahead of the rest of the state. So for all the poverty, for all the challenges, for all the very real, they're ahead of where the state is. I look in rural Tennessee, huge increases in the number of students taking and passing AP classes, vast majority first-generation college goers. Visited East LA, she's gone, but the Promise neighborhood where it's a multi-generational education system. They're educating babies and their parents. And so the demand, frankly, far outseeds our ability to support this work. And my hardest conversations were conversations with folks like Governor Bryant in Mississippi, who was a very staunch conservative, who desperately wanted our resources to expand early childhood education. And we simply didn't have enough dollars. And we know the huge unmet need, the desperate need in Mississippi. So I felt horrible about it. He was extraordinarily frustrated, but we simply didn't have enough competitive dollars to put behind states like Mississippi trying to do better for their babies.
Yeah, I think it is a challenge, and frankly, thank you for your long and thoughtful and nuanced answer. The concern I have quite often is the fact that, yes, there is this huge unmet need, and a lot of people are then spending a lot of time that have very worthy proposals and aren't going to be able to get there. I hear a lot of frustration on the other end when you can only, fund 1 out of 20 grantees. I suspect there was a much higher percentage of that you would have liked to have funded, but they've gone to considerable expense and a lot of effort. And there's certainly some good to be had there, but there's some difficulties in hitting the right balance. With that, I want to move next to a ranking member of the full committee. I do want to pick up where my friend Ms. Lee left off on TRIO, because while you do have an increase there, and I think there's really strong bipartisan support for this program. Certainly in my district, I've seen the difference it makes in helping first-generation college students actually succeed. And as we discussed when you and I had the opportunity to meet, one of my big concerns, and I know this committee's big concerns, is just the dropout rate in college, the number of kids we lose that, number one, walk out with debt maybe that they didn't have before, and much more importantly, I think, walk out sometimes with a sense of failure, that nobody in their family's been able to do it. They tried, they weren't able to do it. It's just really something that I think bears a tremendous amount of focus. Given that, I mean, what you've added is about $20 million. It's for another program, and as you've said, an innovative program, but it doesn't expand what's already an underused program, and these are pretty competitive programs as it is now. You already are going through a lot of application processes. When I'm dealing with local TRIO programs, they're quite often, wondering, are we going to make it this year? Are we going to be funded this year? That sort of thing. So tell me, if you will, number one, why not more money in that program? If you have concerns, I'm delighted to hear them. I would really want to know what they are, because I know we have put a lot on your table, and we're asking you to do everything from preschool to make sure that nobody drops out of college. And I do worry sometimes when we have programs that I think are working, at least, we're stretching you so far, maybe we're not putting enough focus on those areas. So talk to me a little bit about what your plans are for TRIO, and anything else that you want to throw in that would, again, reinforce the ability of children or young people once they enroll in college to stay there and actually get through with that degree.
So happy to have a conversation about more resources for TRIO and other programs. That's music to my ears. And the point, and I should also come back, Congressman Lee, to your point, we don't just have one funding source trying to help first-generation college goers. So obviously TRIO is a big part, Gear Up's a big part. Clearly the community college thing is a huge push to have more at-risk students graduate. The other one that I failed to mention to answer both your questions is First in the World. That's all about more competency-based, speed to degree, better remedial, better developmental work. We've seen huge interest there, real innovation. HBCUs did a great job, disproportionately got significant resources there, which is one reason we didn't bump up the bottom line, because there's more resources in First in the World for HBCUs. I failed to mention that. So it's a longer conversation, but we should sort of lay out for you not just this one funding stream, but here are the 3, 4, 5 things we're doing to try and help more young people graduate. And we know we have much further to go. We know we have to get better faster. So if there are thoughts of things we can do to accelerate the rate of progress, I'm all ears and happy to have that conversation. I will also say, long term, one of the most important things I think we can do to help more young people not just go to college, but to graduate, is to make sure they're going to college and not having to take remedial classes. And I saw a study, I think, from Oklahoma that was like 40%. And so this idea of having high standards, again, those should be set at the local level by states, not by us, to be very clear to our friend from Alabama. But where states have historically lowered standards, we can do all the trio, we can do all the catch-up. We're setting kids up to be less than successful. And this idea of making sure students are graduating across the nation truly college and career ready with a simple definition, meaning if they graduate, they don't have to take remedial classes. That is, I think, a very simple but powerful idea that long term will help to boost the college completion rate that we are all concerned about.
Let me move to the other end of the spectrum, and I know I'm about to run out of time, as we talked, early childhood, I know, is a very, as you made clear here, very important emphasis for you. Right now, I think if you look at early Head Start and Head Start, we're almost a little bit of an inverted period. We include more people as they get a little bit older, and I understand that. But I'm curious if dollars, I've read research that says the best time is 0 to 3. I mean, you've got to get in there early, not 4 and 5. You're almost jeopardizing your 4 and 5. So is that true, number one, and what are you proposing to do at that very entry level in terms of early education?
Yeah, no, it's a really thoughtful question. You raised it the other day, and again, these are long conversations. So my short answer is I always want to look at a 0 to 5 continuum. And we know learning doesn't start in kindergarten at 5. We know learning starts at birth. And whatever we can do in that 0 to 3, whether it's early Head Start or home visiting programs, and I've seen some fantastic programs in rural Kentucky and other places that parents who weren't lucky enough to have a huge amount of education themselves, with some help and support, are doing a fantastic job of raising their kids and helping to give them some opportunities that exist. But for me, it's always not this versus that, or stealing. It's got to be both and. If we look relative to other industrialized nations in terms of access to preschool, we're like 28th. Again, just nothing that we can be proud of or should be proud of. And the fact that we don't lead the world in providing access to high quality early learning opportunities doesn't make sense. And again, outside of Washington, this has become an unbelievably bipartisan issue. And again, from the left to Governor Abbott in Texas, just saw last week, his first priority, strong conservative governor, his first priority is increasing early childhood education. It's beautiful. It's music to my ears. And so we just have to get folks here in Washington to listen to what's going on back home. And I don't say this lightly. I think your state, Oklahoma, has done this as well or better than any other state. A strong conservative state, governor and House and Senate. And if every state was doing some of what Oklahoma was doing, our nation would be in a much better situation. So whether it's Oklahoma on the early childhood side, whether it's Tennessee on the community college side, I think they're fantastic examples that we should be learning from and throwing politics and ideology out the window. Well,
thank you. And just a word to the wise, anything you can find in rural Kentucky that's working will be well received on this committee. So with that,